Hello, welcome back to the channel for the Band of the Red Hand. I am your host, Heather A. Bussey, a writer and editor, and member for the Band of the Red Hand on Facebook as founded by Craig Powers. If you want to check us out there, look up the Band of the Red Hand on Facebook. We are a fan and cosplay group, and also we have this channel which we will be talking about the Wheel of Time, of course, the books. We will post videos on events that we attend, how our cosplay is going to be growing over however long it takes. The eventual goal is to create something similar to the 501st. We'd like to become an official cosplay and charity group that does events. You know, assuming the Wheel of Time will become quite popular with the TV show, and we'd like to be a part of that and utilize our fandom to bring joy to others who are in need. And then this channel, of course, is just to support the Band of the Red Hand and also be there for the fandom. I am doing a series on Matrim Cauthon, specifically a writer perspective on how Robert Jordan created the character of Matt Cauthon and his story arc. I've already done book 1 and 2 for Matt Cauthon and how Robert Jordan created him and established him as a character. I went over his flaws, his qualities, things that he knows about already early on in the story, his motivations and goals at the start of the story, and how that progressed in book 1 and 2. In book 3, things really take a turn for Matt Cauthon. He really ramps up as a character. And this is actually where a lot of fans really enjoy Matt Cauthon for the first time. I would say I'm probably an exception in that I liked him right off the bat in book 1, but when I analyze how writers build characters, being that my background is in writing, I really connected to him immediately. So Matt Cauthon in book 3. Robert Jordan has established that Matt has this ruby dagger which is tainted with this creature from Shadar Logoth in book 1 and 2. He loses the dagger briefly, gets it back, and he is on his way to Tar Valon to have this dagger and the influence of the dagger severed from him by Aes Sedai. The Aes Sedai are going to perform a weave on Matt to remove this influence of the dagger from him so that he will live and heal. Matt is in the White Tower. He has several things that happen in this book that really move his character along in his plot. So at the beginning of the story, Robert Jordan established Matt as someone who wanted adventure and wanted to seek his fortune outside of Emond's Field before he settles down. This is something he thinks about later on in the books, and early on in the story he shows enthusiasm for the possibility of adventure, and even when Emond's Field is attacked by the Trollocs, he still at that time sees it as somewhat of an adventure, an opportunity to get out of Emond's Field and see the world. His immediate experiences challenge his desires to that end. His first encounter with treasure and fortune don't go so well. He is enticed by Shadar Logoth and the evil spirit there, and it affects him so much so he loses parts of his mind and memory. He starts to waste away in physical body. He changes, his character personality kind of gets darker, meaner, less playful. He's less trusting. He becomes very suspicious, as we witness in book 2 through Rand's point of view and other character point of views. In the last video, I did kind of criticize a little bit Robert Jordan's choice in not giving us any Matt POV chapters, in that we miss out on this struggle Matt has, contending with the spirit in the dagger. Perrin is struggling with adapting to being someone that can commune with wolves and move through the dream, and then also Rand is contending with channeling and being the Dragon Reborn. Matt is contending with something too, and a lot of fans, I don't think, get the full impact of what he is contending with, which is this evil spirit and Shader Logoth. In fact, you could almost say some of the negative qualities about Matt are directly a result of this spirit, and we don't get to see it firsthand. We get to see Perrin's struggle firsthand, we get to see Rand's struggle firsthand. I love this series. I love epic fantasy. It definitely influenced my career in writing, and so I'm not criticizing Robert Jordan's choice from the perspective that it diminishes the series in my eyes. It doesn't at all. I just would have liked to see some Matt chapters earlier on so that we could see what he's thinking, feeling, and experiencing firsthand. It would really have helped readers connect to him earlier on, but Matt's a difficult character for many people to not only analyze, but I think it was a little hard for Robert Jordan to write, and it certainly was for Brandon Sanderson later on, as he admitted in interviews. So there is that aspect. As many people know, Matt is kind of a symbolism of Odin in the stories, and I don't know when Robert Jordan decided to bring that symbolism in. Was it really at the beginning or not? Because as we see in book 3, Matt has knowledge already of ancient Manetheren, at least through being able to speak the Old Tongue, but he doesn't just speak the Old Tongue. He speaks specifically to ancient Manetheren and the last king of Manetheren and the last elite troops of Manetheren that used to guard the king. He actually speaks in the Old Tongue and in reference to that time and place, which is more a strength of Matt's connection to the past and possibly a past life that Robert Jordan started to write into the series. We know that later on he goes through the Ter'angreal and Radian to get the memories from the Ilfin and Aelfin. And it's been said in interviews and in the story at different points that it's possibly the memories of other men. From Matt's viewpoint, he thinks it's probably the memories of other men. I didn't always buy that because of book 3, and we're going to get into why here. A few things happen that are interesting for Matt in this book and his character arc. So Robert Jordan chose to make Matt kind of a lot like any young person at the beginning of the story who wants to get out into the world, discover who they are, find their own fortune, seek their own destiny. He is kind of that character, and it's easy to relate to him in that regard. He's also playful, adventurous, funny. He loves a good time, and once he is confronted with the dagger, he does take a turn for the worst. And I think that's really expected and reasonable considering what he's actually going through. Rand and Perrin change, sometimes in negative ways as well, when they're confronting their challenges, but we get to see that from their viewpoint, so it's easier to empathize with them. We don't get that with Matt. So Robert Jordan chooses to use Matt to move the story forward, and here's how. He writes this dagger. Matt has to have it severed from him, so it gets Matt to Tar Valon. It also poises Matt to do some other things in the story very nicely, and one of them is to help Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve, specifically, and Tom Marilyn, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. This will speak to another facet of Matt's character, which is being the good friend that he truly is inside. He always likes to play off that he'd rather go off and do his own thing, have freedom and adventure, while he isn't just pulled back because of the Ta'veren nature that he experiences. As we see earlier in the story, he helps Rand even though he'd rather release a badger on the green and he'd rather go and have fun. He does actually do the right thing immediately with very little argument. He does have quite the mouth on him. He's got a colorful vocabulary. He swears a lot. Blood and bloody ashes is a frequent phrase of Matt Cauthon's, so I won't disregard those qualities about him. But I think when it comes down to Matt, we're going to see really truly what he is like in book 3. Not just that he's healed, not just that he has the fight with Galen and Galad where he beats them, but this really grows who he is as a caring person, even though he tries to come off as not caring. And here is where he is getting healed. Page 164 of The Dragon Reborn. And this is the original hardcover series. He's getting healed and he yells out in the old tongue. Again, he yells out, Los Valdar, Kubiari, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. I have terrible pronunciation as it is. I'm not a speaker. I write full-time. I hardly talk in my day-to-day out loud, so it's difficult. Then he says, Karai and Kaldazar, Al Kaldazar, which is for the honor of the Red Eagle, for the Red Eagle, something like that. And of course, we know that's the symbol of Manetheren. We know that in this scene, he's talking about these specific elite troops for King Aemon. We also know at that time, he knows who Aes Sedai are, and he says, Mia Allende Aes Sedai, Kabalain Masain Yi Indi Muagi Aes Sedai Masain Yi Mia Allende. Okay, yeah, so I don't know if I said that correctly. Probably not. But that is, he's saying something along the lines, I am no pawn in Aes Sedai games, or that's not the exact translation. Something like, he is not a dog for an Aes Sedai leash or some such. I know it's explained later in the chapter, and I'm not going to read word for word everything, but for the sake of analysis and fair use, I just pointed out that little section here, because it is specific to ancient Manetheren, specific to a time and place. So he yells that, and he has other incidents where he does do this, but I think leading up into them severing the dagger, that's interesting because of what happens once the dagger's influence is removed from Matt, and that occurs, the next interesting point occurs on page 176 of The Dragon Reborn, and that is when Matt has his first past life memory. And this is without going through the Red Door Triangle in Rhuidean. This precedes that, so I've always wondered, and if Robert Jordan were alive and I could have ever met him and asked, I would have asked, why did you start this build-up earlier in the stories and then have him get all those memories later on? And I know why he gets the memories later on, through the Red Door Triangle. Since he is symbolically linked to Odin, he has to give up something for knowledge, and going through the Red Door Triangle is much like Odin hanging himself on the world tree to get knowledge, and he loses the eye, and he has the spear. He is associated with ravens. Another aspect of Odin is that he is a very skilled strategist. His abilities with winning battles is linked with Odin, and I don't think that's the thing that people know the most about Odin. I got to talk to some women who actually study the Norse pantheon and practiced, I don't know if they're heathen or what, I can't remember, but they practice worship of the Norse pantheon, and they had a lot of interesting things to say about Odin, and I can see that reflected in Matt, and that part of Matt's luck is part of Matt's fortune, luck, his ability in battles, his love of women, his humor and interest in mischief. It's all actually very much associated with Odin, in that he's mischief, kind of like Loki, but in ways Odin is considered mischievous, but more in a wily, wise, clever way that that brings about a lot of results surrounding strategy, being an excellent battle leader, and Odin, I guess, was known to love women, or is known to love women. I don't mean to step on people's religions at all. I'm just looking at this from the book itself. He was a great strategist, and of course, Matt, being symbolic of that, would have to have done something, sacrificed something of himself to gain those memories. So I can see why Robert Jordan did that later with the Red Door and Rudian, and of course we know Matt loses an eye, and he actually dies several times and comes back, and we'll get into all that later, but we can't deny that Robert Jordan didn't start writing some of this memory stuff earlier on, because the evidence is here, as I said, page 176. The evidence is here. Sorry, I had it backwards. Page 167. I kept saying page 176. It's 167. Matt has his first past life memory, and this is before the Red Door, Terangriel, and Rudian. He, right at the bottom, he's speaking in the old tongue, but then he goes into this vision of a past life, and it is the packed lines of spearmen stretched a mile or more to either side below him, dotted with the pennants and banners of towns and cities and minor houses. The river secured his flank on the left, the bogs and mires on the right. From the hillside he watched the spearmen struggle against the massive Trollocs trying to break through, 10 times the humans' number. Spears pierced black Trolloc mail, and spiked axes carved bloody gaps in the human ranks. Screams and bellows harried the air. So he has this memory here, and he's actually leading, because later on in that memory he says, footmen prepare to pass cavalry forward. He drew his sword. In this past life, Matt knows how to use a sword, which is interesting. He says forward the heart guard, and he digs his heels in and his mount leaps forward, and he says forward, and he was first to strike the Trolloc line for the honor of the Red Eagle. So not only does he have past lives past life memory in language and in vision before Rudian, he also is exhibiting battle skill, and not just knowledge of battles here, but actual ability to fight. And it's all right on the page. I encourage you to go read it. And I just think it's super neat that Robert Jordan laid the foundation for this, but then kind of switched gears a little bit later on. Maybe he thought it would come out better that way. I don't know. We can't ask him. I always thought maybe he forgot he put this in, or maybe he changed his mind. That could be too. Writers will definitely switch gears while they're creating a story, especially a really long epic or serial. There's actually things I forgot. I wrote a serial that was published quite some time ago now, and there would be things from entry to entry that sometimes I would forget, but then also after a while I'd change my mind, and if I could go back, I'd change things in the story. So maybe Robert Jordan felt some of that. We also know that originally the series was going to be 6 books, and that was changed to, I think, 12 books. And then, of course, we now know that it's 14 books plus the prequel, so some of that stuff had to be shifted, and things have to come out a little differently. It's one of the things I love about this series, because it made it seem okay to just be a really great writer, or at least he is, and you still have things to adjust to in the writing, and things that might come up or change. So Matt has this memory, and he is healed. He's eating voraciously. As we know, with channeling and getting healed that way, you have to eat a lot to restore your health and energy. Some of the healing comes from the actual person that's getting the healing, and that's no exception for Matt. He also has this reflection about blowing the horn of Valir, so he is the horn sounder in book 2. He is kind of at this point a little bit, not freaked out entirely, but curious and a little concerned about his role in this. So not being able to get away from his destiny. And they do kind of talk to him a little bit about, at one point, him sounding the horn of Valir, and he feels like he's not going to get away from Aes Sedai. He feels like they're pulling all the strings at this point, and we know they're not. We know that the last battle is coming, but from someone with limited knowledge in the world as a character, I think it's understandable that he would have some questions or concerns and feel a bit fearful. His fear comes out in being suspicious of Aes Sedai. His fear comes out in being, his fear manifests in being afraid of Rand and saying he wants to stay away from him, even though he is his friend. That's one of the ways I think Matrim Cauthon shows fear, is avoidance, or trying to avoid situations. Other people want to tackle their fears and confront them. Some people want to run. Some people don't acknowledge them, and I think Matt even kind of doesn't acknowledge them. He doesn't just avoid things that are uncomfortable for him, but he doesn't even want to admit that it's fear-based response that he's having. But I think that makes him very human and flawed, and of course Robert Jordan exploits this to move the story. He writes all these flaws into these characters that really naturally move the story. He finds out that, interestingly, Tam and Abel Cauthon have gone to the White Tower to try to find the boys. So if anyone at this point was questioning if people from Eamon's Field cared about what happened to them, they did, and Robert Jordan addresses that in the text. This comes out, of course, on page 176. And then in the next chapter, he has a confrontation with Selene, who we know is Lanfear. Lanfear visits Matt and tries to entice him to trust her and follow her. Matt kind of sees through her, and I find that really interesting. Matt has a confrontation with Selene, or Lanfear. He doesn't immediately fall head over heels. She's attractive, probably one of the most attractive women in the story, as she's described, with long dark hair, skin like the moon, or whatever. That's her symbol. Selene is actually a goddess of the moon in, I think it's Roman or Greek mythology. I can't remember. Maybe someone can correct me in the comments below or let us know. She is trying to entice him and influence him, but Matt is kind of like, who are you? And he actually asks her, what are you? And if you're not Aes Sedai, he says, what are you? And who are you? And he doesn't immediately trust her. She tries some channeling on him, and his head hurts. And then someone comes in, and I think it's the Merlin or someone who wants to talk to him, and she leaves. But we know that the Forsaken have tried to have an impact early on with Matt and Perrin, and that is in this book, book 3. The next thing for Matt that moves the story, he wants to get out of Tar Valon. Matt has a visit from La Marilyn also after he's healed, and she talks to him about blowing the horn of Valir and his destiny to be the horn sounder so long as he lives, because he was the first person to blow it. So now he is linked to that in that way. And I don't mean linked to the horn as a hero of the horn, I mean linked as someone who blew the horn, and it will answer his call, not anyone else's, so long as he lives. So he knows that, and that obviously gives an element of danger. Robert Jordan has upped the stakes and up the danger level for our MC here. And he did it in a very slight, subtle way, a warning through the Merlin. He also upped the ante a little bit with Abel and Tam coming there and the Aes Sedai just turning them away and not giving them information. So that kind of gives Matt a reason to distrust the Aes Sedai, the fact that they didn't really tell them anything and didn't have them wait and say, oh, they're coming here, or you can see them. They actually kind of turned them away and dodged them. So that would give Matt and anyone pause on trusting Aes Sedai outright. I know I wouldn't trust an organization that kept me from my mother or my children. I would think, oh, they have some type of machination going on, and we can't entirely trust them because they're not being entirely forthcoming and honest. So Matt decides to go out and explore. He wants to get out of Tar Valon, and this is when a lot of people really start to like Matt Cauthon. He goes down to the training yard and he's exploring Tar Valon. He finds the training yard. Galen and Galad are there practicing with the other warders in training. Of course, Aes Sedai and novices and accepted who have free time are watching. They all love Galad, and he's like one of the best looking men in the series, but Matt is watching this and he's kind of like, I could beat both of you at the same time. He's a bit boastful, and he places a wager with them. Places a wager with them that he can beat them both with a staff. And they take him on, and he does beat them soundly. Matt already had some skill with a staff, so it's not that odd for him to beat them. And instead of Galad and Gawain paying up, their trainer Hammer, of course, does. We know he does beat them, and it's a fun scene for Matt, a fan favorite. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. Of course, if you haven't read it, I'm not sure why you're watching the video. Definitely tons of spoilers. What's funny about this fight scene, Matt is still healing from the dagger. He still feels weak. It's even mentioned in the fight scene, but he still beats them both. Both of them are pretty hale, pretty healthy, and 2-on-1. You'd think they'd have an advantage on Matt, but he kind of destroys them. Doesn't kill them, obviously, but definitely beats them. It's awesome. That doesn't really move the story so much, but it does actually show some things about character. So a lot of people could say this scene isn't necessary for the story. I would argue it's necessary for character development and a proof of character in Matt, his skill, but also for Gawain and Galad's development. They start out the story knowing their place in the world. They know exactly what's expected of them. Their futures are planned, basically. Gawain knows exactly who and what he's going to become. He knows, basically, and has his entire life, what his entire life is going to be. Except maybe the woman he falls in love with and gets married to. He knows his exact duty. And I think there's a level of confidence and maybe even a bit of arrogance in knowing that, because they behave in that way. And very self-assured anyways. And when they are beaten here, they have to kind of confront the fact that maybe things are not going to go as exactly as they think it will. Matt creates that excellent contrast, as he did in the first and second book for Rand and Perrin. How Matt handles things, once again here, contrasts nicely with the characters in the scene and who is available in Tar Valon. He looks at things differently. He also challenges people on their preconceived notions and what they think, and this is evidence of that. He provides opportunity for Gawain and Galad to learn something about themselves, while also learning that maybe he has more ability than he'd ever thought before. that is an evidence in favor of Matt. So he is gaining a little bit of self-confidence and knowledge about himself in that scene. So next, of course, we know that Matt is asked to carry a letter to Camelin for Elaine. And because he's in Tar Valon, Robert Jordan has set Matt up to this next stage in the story, and that is carrying a letter for Elaine to let her mom know that she's okay. She's going on an errand for the Merlin. I don't even know if she really reveals that much, but Matt's just sending a letter to her mom home. And he, on the way, leaving Tar Valon, runs into Tom, and Tom is in this inn. Matt is attacked, of course, and he goes into this inn and he sees Tom, and Tom is drunk. Not just drunk, but almost sick in soul and mind. He's very depressed, and his demeanor is negative, and the women there, the server and the innkeeper there, are very worried about Tom Merlin, and Matt, promises he'll take care of him. He helps Tom sober up some and talks Tom into coming with him instead of wasting away. Tom is lost. He laments the loss of Morghese, obviously, a little bit in that scene, and he also talks about Dina, who he blames himself for her death. Tom doesn't initially want to help Matt or leave, but he does decide to go, and they do head off to Camelin together. So in a way, Matt has actually kind of helped Tom in this scene, and Tom is available to help Matt. Robert Jordan did a great job tying characters back together. He introduces characters, he brings them apart to move the story, and for their own personal growth. That's part of the reason Rand, Perrin, and Matt had to have a break from one another. They have personal growth that they experience away from one another. So, Matt's on his own, and he has to figure out who he can trust. And Tom, he knows already he can trust because he's been able to in the past. So they travel together. They go off to Camelin. I can't remember how they get there. If it's Bail Doman's boat or another one. Cannot remember. Maybe someone can remind me in the comments below. But they go to Camelin. While there, Matt has difficulty delivering this letter. He has to kind of sneak in to get it to Morghese, and while he's there, he overhears a conversation of someone there, and it is Morghese's paramour, her lover, talking about having Elaine killed, and this man is there who says he will, of course, go off and kill her. And Matt, hearing this, immediately thinks, I have to do something. He doesn't want to, of course, but he says he can't leave. He can't just let someone go off and try to kill Elaine and Nynaeve and Egwene, so he decides to go with Tom to Tyr, where the girls are going, to try to save them. Being Matrim Cauthon, he does the right thing even though he doesn't want to, and he grumbles the whole time about it. Maybe not literally the whole time, but of course, Matrim Cauthon is grumbling, but he's going to do what he has to do. I think that is how he kind of copes. His grumbling and his desire to avoid situations is a coping mechanism for him. I like how Robert Jordan shows that on the page. So they head off to Tyr. On the way, Tom Merlin gets sick, and he's actually getting sicker. By the time they reach Tyr, they find out where the girls have been in this woman's shop, or she's a wise woman or herbalist in Tyr. They go there and they find out the girls have been there, but Tom Merlin is sick. So Matt, towards the end of book 3, he's gonna go and get the girls out of the Stone of Tyr. That's where they're being held. The Lord Brend, or whatever his name I think it is, maybe someone can remind me in the comments, has brought them to the Stone of Tyr, and they are captive there. We know that they were betrayed. Julian Sander betrayed them, even though it was under, I think, compulsion that he did so. He still feels guilty, by the way, but Matt doesn't know him yet. Tom and Matt are supposed to go and get the girls out of the Stone of Tear, and instead of Tom going, Matt asks the woman to keep Tom there. He's super sick, and Matt doesn't want to see anything happen to Tom. He really cares about him. So he has Tom looked after, and Matt decides to go and break into the Stone of Tear by himself. The Stone of Tear, which has never been successfully invaded. No one has ever successfully infiltrated it, as far as we know. He decides to do this by himself. Hundreds of defenders are probably there. He doesn't know what he's facing, and I think that speaks a lot to his character, and Robert Jordan doesn't say it, he shows it in scene, and it's awesome. So Matt tries to make his way into the stone. On the way he meets Julian Sander, and they talk, and he finds out that Julian wants to help the girls. So they decide to embark together, but Matt initially was going to go by himself. And now it's a party of two trying to break the girls out of the Stone of Tear. They also run into Aiel on the way in, and of course we know this is when the battle with the Aiel occur. The Stone of Tear falls or has been successfully invaded. Matt helps Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve out of the cells in the Stone of Tear. Of course, this is where they show a huge lack of gratitude towards Matt. Matt can be very coarse. He swears a lot. He can be roguish, but he does what's right, and they don't say thank you. In fact, they're really rude to him and mean, particularly Nynaeve in that scene, and he still does the right thing anyways, and helps him escape the Stone of Tear. Of course, when the stone falls, Rand has captured it, and they stay there for a while, and of course Moiraine and Lan and everyone, basically the whole party is back together again. All of them are there together. That left Demon's Field in book 1, they all come back together in book 3. I'm going to end there. Tell me your thoughts on how Robert Jordan wrote Matt as a character in the comments. Did I forget something from this book? What are your thoughts on his character arc? Oh, thank you all for watching. I am Heather A. Bussey with the Band of the Red Hand. If you want to hit a like and subscribe, please go ahead. Check us out on Facebook. And I want to thank everyone who has subscribed already and watched the videos. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.